everyone. We had just a bit of a tech glitch in the beginning, but welcome to our workshop. If you have not downloaded your workbook for today's workshop, please do that now because you are definitely gonna want to take notes. But I am so glad you're here and I would love to know where you're all from. So can you just put that in the chat while I'm just starting our workshop together this morning for me, this afternoon for you if you're on East Coast or wherever you are in the world. I know we have over 6,000 people registered for this workshop. And so I am so excited. You know, God cares so much about relationships. Did you know that every single one of the 10 commandments has something to do with relationships? Both our relationship with him and our relationships with one another. There's nothing more important to him than that we learn how to do relationships well. But because we're sinful, because we do things wrong, relationships get messed up, relationships get broken. So in this webinar, I'm going to help you understand how that happens, but probably more importantly, how to repair those relationships, how to repair broken trust, and to know whether or not it's really happening or it's just image management or whitewash. So I am so glad that you're here. Again, put in the chat where you're from. Let me just say that I probably will have some men watching this webinar who are in destructive marriages and want to know what they should do too. Guys, you are welcome to be here. My ministry is mostly to women, so I'm going to be talking as if the woman is more of the victim of this and the man is more of the perpetrator. Doesn't mean that I don't know that men get abused. I get emails all the time from people saying, why don't you ever talk as if the man's... Because I don't really minister to those people. I don't minister to men that much. In my blog a little bit, but not normally. And so my main ministry is to women who are in these kind of relationships. So that's how I talk. So please don't take offense. Understand that I understand women are abusive too. In fact, I experienced that myself, which I'll share in a little bit. So I want you to know that. But I am going to speak to women primarily. But if you're a guy and you're here and you want to know how to do better with relationships, even if you're a guy who's been accused of abuse, even if you're the one who's broken the trust, you will learn here what you need to do if you want to rebuild that trust. And let me tell you, it's not just saying, I'm sorry, let's get over it. That's not working. That's not going to repair broken trust, especially when that trust has been broken again and again and again and again and again. We're not just talking about sexual trust. We're talking about trust in lots of different areas, which I'll share with you in just a minute. So let's get rolling because we have a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to move right into the slides. Please download your workbook so that you can take notes if you'd like, and we'll get started. All right, so let me move on to the next step, and I'm going to turn me off and turn the slides on. Then I'm going to come back and do a Q&A and answer all your questions. All right? Okay, hold on. Now I got to make sure I'm doing the right thing, so hold on. All right. Do I do that first? I never remember. I practice about 3 times before I start, and then I can never remember which is next. All right. All right, we're just about ready. Here we are. Okay, so how long do you keep trying? And how will you know the change is real? This is probably the most asked question I get. So let's start with looking at yourself. Does this sound like you right now? Are you feeling confused or scared, isolated and alone, or exhausted and tired of the drama? Maybe even a little defeated and depressed? Do you feel frustrated and angry all the time or uncertain what God wants you to do, feeling helpless and powerless to know how to change your marriage or your man into something loving, stable, and safe? Which one of those is where you're at? Put that in the chat right now. While you're doing that, I'm going to read where you're all from. Hold on. So I see people from Florida and Alberta, Canada. I do not see the download to the workbook. You got an email this morning giving you a link to the workbook, and there's also one at the top of the chat. You should be able to watch on your computer or on your phone. Chandler, yeah, near me. Billingham, I was just in Spokane. Wow, you're from Norway. Wow, I'd love to be there. My family is from Norway. My dad's whole side of the family. Indiana, Ontario. Having some tech problems, Martha, in the chat, if you can answer some of their questions. Munich, Germany. Wow, Robin, we're going to be in Munich. We're going on a Viking cruise, and we're going to end up in Nuremberg. I'd love to meet you. I'll be taking a little tour in Munich. New Jersey. All right. Georgian. I don't know if that's Georgia or Georgian from Russia. Louisiana. Wonderful, wonderful. South Africa. Wow. I'm humbled that you would take your time to be with me. So I'm going to not waste your time, but I really want you to focus. And so if you don't have the workbook yet, download it. If you don't, if you're frazzled looking for it, hey, just let it go. Be present. You can download it later. You'll actually get a replay to the webinar if you want to, and you can take notes then that time, okay? So here we go. We are going to get going right now. All right, this is what we're going to do. This workshop is going to help you to learn how to make an amazing life-changing shift from trying harder to change your marriage and your man, feeling confused about what God says you should do, feeling alone, isolated, to knowing how to reclaim your power, having a sound biblical roadmap to repair broken trust, being able to recognize whether or not efforts are sincere or just image management, and feeling heard, understood, and supported so that you can please and glorify God. Sound good? All right. Good. So just in case you have no idea who I am, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Leslie Vernick. I was a clinical licensed social worker with a private counseling practice in Pennsylvania for over 35 years. I worked primarily with women and couples, especially in difficult, abusive, and destructive marriages. Now I've moved to Phoenix and I'm a relationship coach. I've written 7 books and hundreds of articles. I've had the opportunity to speak nationally and internationally on relationships and was recently a part of the Southern Baptist curriculum to help churches do a better job around the whole idea of identifying abuse in church. And if you want a free curriculum on that, check it out at churchcares.com. I received the American Association of Christian Counselors Caregiver Award and have been a featured guest on Focus on the Family, Family Life Today, Moody Radio, and Divorce Care. But my greatest accomplishment is that I've been married to the same good man for 44 years. I have 2 adult children, 3 amazing granddaughters. Aren't they adorable? Every grandchild is adorable, I know. Mine are especially adorable. And 1 cute puppy whose name is Addison, but I've been recently calling her Trouble. And I also want you to know before we even get started that I have a high view of marriage, meaning I believe in the sanctity of marriage and that marriage is to be a picture of Christ and his church, which is a loving relationship, not an abusive one or a destructive one. And I also have a high view of Scripture. What that means is I believe the Bible is the Word of God and has the word of life. I believe that the Bible gives us God's wisdom on how to do life and how to do relationships. I've also grown professionally on this whole topic of abuse, but my real journey began personally. I know what it feels like. I grew up with a mom who was abusive. She divorced my dad when I was 8 years old. She was an alcoholic and she was verbally as well as physically abusive to me. And I wrestled with how do I deal with this, especially after I became a Christian. At first, I was just angry and, was giving it right back. But when I became a Christian, I'm thinking, how do I handle this? Do I still have to honor my mother? I didn't live with her anymore. She lost custody of us when I was in high school. And I went to live with her, and she didn't really stay much in touch with us. And actually, I didn't see or speak to my mother for over 15 years because of her abusive behavior toward me. I didn't feel safe. My husband didn't feel safe. We just didn't really feel like we could have any kind of conversation that was constructive. She constantly would betray me with lies and deceit. She, for example, give me a gift and then tell everyone I stole it from her. She would say horrible things to me, threaten me with things. And I just didn't know how to navigate that, even as a Christian counselor. I wasn't clear. Do I forgive and forget? Do I grace covers a multitude, or love covers a multitude of sins? Do I even send her a Mother's Day card? For goodness sake, they don't have Mother's Day cards for this kind of relationship because there's no Mother's Day card that just says, have a nice day. It's not like you're a wonderful mother. And so how do you honor a parent, or how do you live with someone and respect someone who you don't? And so I had to really wrestle with that myself. How do you have an ongoing relationship with someone who mocks you, treats you with utter contempt, disrespects you? How do you honor someone you're afraid of and you can't even talk to? And so those were the struggles that I personally had that I had to figure out that I want to share with you. In my ministry, I've also had the wonderful opportunity to travel to Romania, to Iraq. Here I was in helping the secular community leaders in the city of Erbil in northern Iraq, teaching them mental health skills because they're so far behind in helping people of trauma with the war and depression. And talk about destructive relationships, they're there. Also teaching ministry leaders in Cuba. And recently I had the opportunity to be on a panel at the White House. But really, God has called me to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, ensure justice for those being crushed, speak up for the poor and helpless, and see that they get justice. Now again, make sure you've downloaded your handout, your workbook, because we're heading into the webinar content right now. And stay with me till the end, because I do have a special gift for you, but you have to hang in until the Q&A. Now the workshop itself will take about an hour, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but then I'll be here after to answer your questions. So do me a favor and turn off your distractions. Turn off your cell phones, shut stuff down. I'm going to temporarily shut down the chat because I really do want you to listen, and you can't do two things at once. And I'll open up the chat at the end so that you can put your questions in there or you can talk with one another. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the chat right now. And let me just give you a little agenda of what we're going to do today. First, you're going to get crystal clear what exactly is a destructive marriage. And I'll compare it with the 3 essential elements in all healthy marriages. Next, I'm going to give you the 5 areas where marital trust gets broken. And it's not just in the sexual realm. Then I'm going to give you the exact roadmap that you need if you're going to repair that broken trust. I'm also going to give you some key indicators to let you know the change is real or not, as well as let you know what your work is to do in all of this in your next steps forward. And then I'm going to open up for Q&A. Sound good? So I have a lot to cover, so fasten your seatbelts and pull out your pen. Here we go. You should have, if you've already viewed my video, if he doesn't hit you, is it still abuse? I hope you got a lot out of that. But I think the number one reason that Christian leaders ask that question is because we're not always sure about the difference between a difficult marriage where there's a lot of stressors, a disappointing marriage where a spouse doesn't live up to some of your expectations or ideas, or a destructive marriage. The Bible tells us in James that we all stumble in many ways. You know, there's no perfect marriage. There's no perfect relationship. There's no relationship without some sin and some suffering. There's no perfect wife. There's no perfect husband. In fact, I just got an email today from someone, you'll know who you are because you're listening to this, about do I have to keep, should I not confront my husband until I finish doing my own work? And I said, so you have to be perfect in order to confront your husband about what he's doing? And she sort of chuckled. You know, that's how we sort of think, that I've got to be all perfect. So let me help you discern what constitutes an abusive and destructive relationship. Because a destructive marriage violates the very dignity and personhood of the spouse. It undermines her confidence in her self-worth, her self-esteem, and it systematically degrades, diminishes, and can eventually destroy the woman who God intended her to be. Now, it's really, really, really important that you understand that an abusive relationship, especially marriage, is not about hitting. So physical abuse is not the issue. You might have physical abuse, of course, and that's dangerous for you, but that's not the underbelly of abuse. Abuse is not about anger out of control. That's why the answer is yes. If he doesn't hit you, it is still abuse. And let me tell you why. Abuse is not about anger at all or hitting. It's about control. An abuser wants control. And in a marriage, there's a gross imbalance of power and control coupled with an attitude of entitlement. Now, Christian people helpers like your pastor or your counselor often don't catch the power and control dynamics. And this can be because of their conservative beliefs about what they think the Bible teaches about headship and submission. But does the Bible really say that an adult woman who gets married now has the status of a child who has to ask permission for everything? She can't make a decision for herself on what she wears, whether or not she cuts her hair, whether or not she reads a certain book or goes back to college or gets a job or visits her mother for the weekend or talks on the phone to her girlfriend. Does headship and submission mean that a wife is not an equal partner, but more a slave who's to have unquestioning obedience to her master husband? Now, we could spend the whole hour on this topic alone, and maybe I should do a workshop on this. But those of you who know my ministry know that I believe in the Bible and what the Bible says. But I have news for you. Nowhere in the Bible does headship mean that a husband gets to have his way all the time, make every decision, or order a wife around. That has another biblical name: selfish, oppressor, not biblical headship. Jesus made it crystal clear to his followers that if you want to be the head of something, then you get to serve first, not bully for your own way. So what strategies might a person use to get control and power over a spouse? Well, physical for sure. If you scare someone or threaten someone or hurt her or those she loves when she doesn't do what you want, you usually get your way. And so when a husband uses physical power to get compliance and control over his wife, understand this: he knows exactly what he's doing and how much he can get away with. But control over another person can also be gained in other ways. And men who abuse also know that physical abuse is not sufficient to gain control over someone totally. You also have to manipulate her mind and her will. Plus, most men know that they can be arrested for physical abuse, at least in the United States. So often, a man uses other means to control his wife, like emotional and verbal abuse. And yes, this is in the Bible. God's word is clear about the long-term negative effects on a person's soul, spirit, and body when they are verbally battered. Emotional abuse is real and biblical, and the scriptures warn us repeatedly not to use our words or tongue as a weapon to harm others. Because emotional abuse systematically degrades, diminishes, and can eventually destroy the personhood of the other. The Bible says a crushed spirit, who can bear it? Another way someone gains power over someone is sexually. Have you ever heard the 1 Corinthians 7 passage put on you? You have no right to say no to me. You're my wife, and therefore your body is no longer yours to control, but mine. And you can control a lot of people when you control the money, withholding money, hiding money, not treating a spouse as an equal partner in terms of access to the money, or making financial decisions with joint marital assets without mutual consent. It's an abuse of power. And last but certainly not least, spiritual abuse. What better way to control a Christian woman than to use God's word to manipulate her into doing what you tell her to do, under the guise that you're her authority, you're her head, or even God to her. Therefore, she must submit to you without question. What better way to confuse a Christian woman but to misuse or misquote biblical passages to get your own way, or to shame and degrade you? Some people tell me that spiritual abuse can be the worst form of abuse because now God himself becomes the bully, the oppressor, and there is no one on your side, no one who cares about your plight. You are all alone. But I want you to know, if you've been spiritually abused, despite what your husband or church or pastor teaches, God is not a bully. That's not who God is. From the very beginning, he gave Adam and Eve the freedom even to reject him, the freedom to love him or not love him. God does not force us into obedience or a relationship. He wants a loving relationship, not a religion of rule keepers. Also, chronic deceit, humiliating a spouse, crazy making, or gaslighting and other covert behaviors are also quite effective at making a wife question her judgment or her decision making, her perceptions, and to lose confidence in herself as a competent, strong, adult human being. So if you recognize yourself right now, don't minimize these seemingly lesser types of controlling behavior. Like 1,000 bee stings or paper cuts, over time, they become destructive to your health, to your marriage, and to you as a person who's receiving the repetitive bee stings or paper cuts. I want to show you a power and control wheel from an organization, a domestic violence organization, that shows you the various ways an abuser gains control over a victim. So let's start at the top. Using intimidation, using emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using your children, using male privilege, using economic abuse, and using coercion and threats. All of these behaviors, God says, are sinful. They're unhealthy. They're dysfunctional. And we may all find ourselves doing some of them from time to time. However, when we do, and our partner or our girlfriend or our child says, ouch, stop, don't do that, I don't like that, a relatively healthy individual takes notice and stops. She doesn't rationalize, justify, or excuse it. However, when these behaviors and attitudes are a regular part of marriage, the norm, and no responsibility is taken to change them, instead there's blaming and rationalization and excuse making, the relationship is destructive and abusive. One more thing. When there is chronic patterns of deceit, dependency, and indifference, the marriage is destructive, even if the obvious elements of trying to control the other isn't as apparent. For example, medical care. I remember a woman waking up in the middle of the night, one of my clients asking her husband to take her to the ER because she was having terrible stomach pain. She thought she had a kidney stone. And he told her to call her mother or an Uber because he was too tired. That is abusive. It's destructive to the trust in a marriage, that I trust that you will care about me. I don't trust that anymore. You don't even care about me when I'm needy, when I'm desperate for help. Also, financial indifference to the family's needs. living in poverty when he's spending large sums of money on cars or man toys or vacations, gambling or drugs. Remember, in order to see if a marriage is destructive, rather than just difficult or disappointing, look for patterns where you or someone you know is repeatedly dominated, deceived, dismissed, devalued, demeaned, and degraded. So let me summarize. An emotionally destructive marriage is one in which your personhood, your dignity, and your freedom of choice is regularly denied, criticized, or crushed. And this can be done through words, through behaviors, through economics, attitudes, and misusing the Bible. Did you know that 1 in 4 Christian women report being in a destructive marriage? So let's look at what marriage is and what it isn't. First, it's a relationship, a live, living a relationship. It's not just a legal agreement or arrangement. It's a mutual and reciprocal partnership, not a slave-master or parent-child relationship, or a robotic rule-keeping covenant. I'm terribly troubled by often Christian teaching on the roles of marriage as if you just do your role, you're going to have a great relationship. That's not true. You can be a great wife and still have a terrible relationship with your husband because he doesn't reciprocate. In a healthy marriage, conflict, which you have, it's inevitable, involves solving a problem, not attacking a person. And damages, which happen in any long-term relationship, are repaired through confession, restitution, and real change. So let's look for a minute at the word mutual. For a relationship to be healthy, there must be mutual caring, mutual honesty, mutual respect, mutual responsibility for the care and maintenance of the relationship, and mutual repentance when things go wrong. Now, not every relationship is mutual, but when one consistently lacks mutuality, it's not a relationship, it's ministry. Jesus had relationships that were mutual. Mary and Martha, Peter and John were closer than some of the other people. On the other hand, Jesus ministered to lots of people. But he also mentioned, even when the 10 lepers were healed, only one came back to thank him. There wasn't that reciprocity. His relationship with Judas was not mutual. And when Jesus sobbed about Jerusalem not loving him back in Matthew, he faced the heartache of having ministry with people, but not relationship with certain individuals. The second, reciprocity. There's shared power and responsibility, not one just being the taker and the other being the giver. Paul talked about this balance of mutuality and reciprocity in the scriptures when he wrote to a church who was giving sacrificially of their money to help another church out. And this is what he wrote. I don't mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that is a matter of fairness. Your abundance at the present time should supply their needs so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be what? Fairness. You cannot have a healthy relationship even with another girlfriend if there isn't mutuality and reciprocity within that relationship, let alone a marriage. I mean, how would you feel if you were the only one initiating contact with your friend, always paying for everything, always giving everything, always helping her, always serving your friend, but there was no reciprocity, there was no mutuality? You'd start to feel resentful, taken advantage of, like the relationship was lopsided, like it wasn't a real friendship. And it isn't. The last ingredient to create a safe and trusting relationship is the freedom. Now, in marriage, that doesn't mean the freedom to do whatever you want without any accountability, because when you get married, you choose. You're not forced, but you choose to limit some of your freedoms, like you don't date other people while you're married, or you don't keep all your assets to yourself, or you don't just do what you want with no accountability to your partner. The promises that you make in marriage say that you promise to be accountable. You promise to care about your spouse's needs and feelings and hurts. But in a healthy marriage, you also have to have the freedom to be yourself, to be the person God made you to be, not to be forced or pressured to be a person the other person says you have to be. In one of my coaching groups, one woman told me her husband said to her, as long as you always make me happy and never disappoint me, we'll be fine. Well, it may be fine for him, but what about for her? And who can ever live up to that? Is she not free to make a mistake? Is she not free to have her own opinions or needs or feelings that are different than her husband's? Or isn't she free to contradict him without feeling like she started World War III in her own home? You need the freedom to speak up with your own thoughts and opinions and to disagree in a respectful way. Now, here's another mistake. Many Christian men and pastors misdefine respect as unwavering, unquestioning obedience to whatever your husband says or wants, even if you see him driving the entire family straight off the cliff. You're supposed to be supportive and simply trust God. This is not the definition of respect, nor is it God's plan for a relationship. If you're to be your husband's helpmate, then you have to have the freedom to give him constructive feedback if and when his behavior is harmful to himself, to you, or to the family that God has given him. And if he restricts your freedom to do that under the guise of respect, he's misunderstanding or misusing God's word. And he's using it to silence your voice and control you. You can speak up respectfully and speak the truth in love. And God calls us to do that for one another. But nowhere is it more important than in marriage. So to summarize really quickly, a healthy adult relationship, especially marriage, is one where both people in the relationship give and both receive. There's a safe and open exchange of ideas and feelings and thoughts, and all perspectives are considered and valued. There's also the freedom to respectfully challenge and confront in order to strengthen one another and the relationship. I love how Proverbs captures the basics of a healthy marriage when he writes he or she trusts him or her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life. In other words, trust creates safety in a marriage, and safety leads to greater trust. And when safety and trust are shattered, the marriage relationship is broken. And without repair, it will die, even if you're still legally married. Now, traditionally, most pastors and counselors have acknowledged trust breaking down in the area of sexual fidelity. But that's not the only area where trust needs to be repaired if the relationship is to be viable long term. For sure, a lack of sexual faithfulness and integrity in the sexual area ruins safety and trust in a marriage. But there are 4 other areas where trust breaks down as well. So let me unpack these a bit for you. First, honesty and authenticity. Can you trust your spouse to tell you the truth, even when it's hard? Is he the same person outside the house as he is inside the house? Or is he more Jekyll and Hyde? Charming outside, cruel inside? Does he shine his image for all to admire but behave treacherously at home? If so, you don't trust him. You don't trust who your husband is. You don't even know who your husband is. Therefore, there is no safety for you. Second, compassionate care. Can you trust your husband to care about your feelings, your needs, even your dreams and desires? Does he give himself and his resources to show concern about your welfare? Can you trust him to do you good, not harm, all the days of your life? Maybe his abuse is more passive. I'll call it the sin of indifference. For example, you need help with the kids. You're not sleeping because you have a crying baby to nurse, but he calls you selfish because he says he needs sex every night, and that takes priority over your sleep. And if you love him, you'll meet his needs. But what about your needs? Is it always about him and his needs and his wants? Do they always trump? Or let's say you want to use some of the family money to go back to college, but there's never any extra money for your dreams, only for his. You don't trust him. You don't trust him to do some of the most basic things of any healthy relationship, to care about your needs or feelings, and therefore safety is broken. Reliability. Can you trust him to do what he says he's going to do? When he promises he'll pick the kids up from school, does he? And if he forgets, like we all do sometimes, does he show remorse and take responsibility for his forgetfulness to do what he needs to do to not repeat this problem of forgetfulness? Or do you get the blame? Or does he make excuses over and over again? Can you trust him when he says he'll go to counseling, or he'll change, or he'll get help, but he never takes action on those promises? Can you trust him when he promises that he paid the bill, or he'll put safety controls on his computer, yet he never does? And when you remind him, he gets defensive and angry, telling you you're a nag and get off his back. You're controlling him. If you can't rely on what he says, trust is broken. You can't rely on him. No trust, no safety. And last but not least is financial trust. And this isn't talking about making a ton of money, but can you trust your husband to be honest with your family resources and give you a say in what is spent and what is saved and where it's saved? Can you trust him to use money and credit wisely so that you aren't in a boatload of debt and can pay your bills? Can you trust him to pay the taxes and not defraud the government where you're going to have huge penalties? Can you trust him to spend the money for the family's welfare and not just for himself? Do you even know where the family money is? Do you know how much money he earns? Do you have access to all the accounts? If not, then trust is broken and there is no safety for you. And no trust, no safety. No safety, no trust. Counselors and pastoral people helpers rarely address these areas of broken trust or lack of safety. Somehow you're just to put your brains on the shelf and forget about all this and just try to make a relationship work again. But when trust and safety have been broken and broken and broken again, I want to tell you something different. It is not possible. The Bible tells us that we're not to trust certain people because of their past behaviors. For example, it says in Proverbs, putting confidence in an unreliable person in times of trouble is like chewing with a broken tooth or walking on a lame foot. Jesus didn't trust himself to everybody because he knew what was in their hearts. And Paul warns Timothy, hey, Timothy, Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. You too, be careful of him, beware of him, for he has vigorously opposed our message. He's telling Timothy not to trust Alexander the coppersmith. So, don't let yourself be guilt-tripped into feeling like a bad Christian because you don't trust your husband. If he has broken trust, he needs to earn it back. Love is a gift. Trust is earned. So, I promised you the roadmap required to repair damaged relationships. Now, I'm not going to be able to share with you in this short time all the twists and turns that are on this roadmap, but I will give you the basics so that you will know whether you're on this road as a couple. And if not, what do you do? First, let me tell you what doesn't work. Now, you've probably tried all of these things already, but if by chance your husband or counselor suggests one of these, say no. Why? Because it doesn't lead to repairs. It only leads to postponement of more pain, heartache, and actually can lead to more damage. So here are the most common detours you will take that will never lead to real healing or change of the abusive patterns. First, let's start with a clean slate and forgive the past detour. This sounds so good and biblical, doesn't it? Let's just wipe the slate clean with grace and start all over. Let's just forget that I hit you, or that I've had a sexual addiction or secret girlfriend for the past 5 years. Let's just forget that I lied to you about most things in our entire marriage. I love you. I'm sorry. So let's just wipe that slate clean and forgive and forget and start fresh. Let's not talk about the past. That's the past. If only it were that easy. Let's briefly look at why. Let's just start with a clean slate and forget the past. Strategy doesn't work. When your marriage is in a pattern of repeated and chronic sin, the past quickly becomes a present again. And now what? You see, we're all creatures of habit, and the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Therefore, even if you truly do try to start with a clean slate and forgive and forget, guess what? The same old habit patterns are still there and will continue to repeat themselves if there's not a clear plan and path to change them. Let me give you an example probably all of you listening can relate to. We all have an eating pattern that we engage in day and day out, healthy or unhealthy. But those of you who struggle with unhealthy eating, how many of you have said to yourself, or even to someone else, tomorrow is a new day. I'm going to wipe the slate clean from all the cookies I ate or wine or beer I drank today, and tomorrow I'm going to start fresh. Yeah, and how long does that good intention last? Not long. It doesn't last if you don't have a specific plan on how you're going to change those unhealthy eating patterns into new healthy eating patterns and have the help and accountability to carry them out long term so that the new eating patterns are created. Another strategy that does not work is superficial changes instead of doing the deeper heart work. So now he's nice and charming and he wants to help you around the house and with the kids. Now he's sorry, he takes you out to dinner, he buys you flowers, he starts going to church, he promises to go to counseling, all great things. And they make you feel hopeful. Please don't misunderstand, these nice things he does are great, but they're not going to repair the marriage any more than putting a fresh coat of paint on your bedroom walls in your house will fix the crack in the foundation. It might feel better and look better in the short term to have freshly painted bedroom walls, but nothing has changed in the long term because the problem that broke trust to begin with has never been addressed or fixed. When I used to live in Pennsylvania in Allentown, there was a corporate office structure that developed a giant sinkhole underneath, and the building started to crumble and crack and sink. And engineers were consulted about what they could do to shore up the building and keep it from sinking. But the damage could not be fixed until the sinkhole problem was addressed. Now, they could have shored up the foundation so it wouldn't have collapsed that week, but without addressing the sinkhole and whether or not the sinkhole was going to reoccur, the building was fragile and vulnerable to collapse. In the same way, when marital trust and safety trust have been broken, doing nice things doesn't fix the sinkhole that fractured the marriage. If that's not addressed, then a lack of safety and trust are damaging the relationship, and the problem that broke safety and trust in the first place is still there, even if not obvious in the moment. Maybe the affair is over, but what was the entitlement thinking? It was okay to lie and cheat on my spouse just because I could, or because I felt hurt and angry? There are a lot of people in disappointing marriages who don't cheat and lie. They don't break trust, even when they don't feel happy or fulfilled. The last strategy that doesn't work to repair broken trust and safety is when only one person in the marriage is committed to change and doing the work. Now, don't get me wrong. Doing your own work is necessary, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but you cannot fix a damaged marriage relationship all by yourself. What you can do is you can make a bad relationship less toxic when you do your own work. For example, you don't repay evil with evil, or you don't retaliate or act out sinfully when you're hurt or angry. But you cannot make a bad marriage a good, safe marriage all by yourself. Now, while you were waiting for this workshop, I sent you a second video to watch. Why you should say no to any more marriage counseling, and I hope you watched it. Well, what's wrong with marriage counseling? This is what's wrong. Abuse, addictions, and chronic adultery are not marriage problems. They cause marriage problems because they break safety and trust. Therefore, marriage counseling is not the best option for help at this point, because until the one who broke trust and safety owns it and takes responsibility for it and understands that the consequences of his behavior is broken trust and no safety, nothing can change, because the root problem is never addressed or healed. Because the root problem is not the lack of safety and trust. Those are the consequences of the root problem. The root problem is the chronic sin of the person, the chronic addictions, the chronic deceit, the chronic adultery, the chronic entitlement, what's going on inside the heart and mind of the one who broke safety and trust to begin with. And this is an individual issue. It surely causes marriage problems, but until that individual issue is addressed, that sinkhole is addressed and owned and confessed and changed, trust can't be rebuilt. Therefore, marriage counseling might be a great step after your husband does his own work to understand and take responsibility for what he's done to break trust, but not until that point. So, what is the road forward? There's two tracks that must come together to create the possibility of a truly restored marriage. First track is reestablishing the basics of relationship, which is trust and safety. The second track is restoring sanity to both the husband and wife. So let's unpack that and look what that means. Let's start with sanity. The Bible tells us that we're all changed and transformed by the renewing of our mind. And God's word also says we all lie to ourselves. And we all need to change our thinking, but it's crucial that destructive individuals own that they need that. If your husband wants to repair broken trust or have a better relationship with you, his thinking must change about himself, about you as his wife, and about marriage, because destructive individuals do not think properly, truthfully, or maturely. The Bible calls it a deluded mind. In Romans 1, it says that they have exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And when someone does that over and over again, God gives them over to a deluded or depraved mind. Now, I'm not saying destructive individuals are not intelligent. Some are brilliant, actually, but they're spiritually and relationally deluded. Now, I don't have time in the short workshop to get into all the untrue ways these individuals think, but let me just share with you 3 big lies of an entitled mindset that have to change if there's going to be true healing in him. First lie is I'm entitled to do as I please with no accountability for what I do. And when you, as a wife, ask me questions or challenge my decisions or actions, you will be silenced or controlled by my wrath, my deceit, my sarcasm, my spiritual sounding words, or my withdrawal. The book of Proverbs talks a lot about the thinking pattern of fools. Most individuals know that at least some level it's true that they are entitled. It's not true that they're entitled to do what they want with no accountability. For example, I bet your husband wouldn't expect to come in late for work, not complete his tasks on time, day after day, and still expect or feel entitled to a raise or a promotion. But in personal and intimate relationships, especially marriage, this lie prevails. I'm entitled to do as I please with no accountability to you for what I do. So how will you know if your spouse believes this lie? Well, when you ask him questions or challenge his decisions or actions, what happens? If he believes this lie, you will be silenced. You are punished if you challenge him. And if you try to hold your husband accountable for a decision or an action that resulted in harm or heartache for your family, you start World War II. Second lie. I'm entitled to the benefits and privileges of marriage, including your warmth and affection, sex, with no responsibility for the way I behave or treat you. It's your fault I act that way. Your feelings are not as important as mine are. You're my wife. Therefore, I'm entitled to have what I want regardless of how you feel or what I've done. If you don't or won't, again, there will be some price you have to pay. And lie number 3, when I mess up or make a mistake, there should be no negative consequences, especially if I say I'm sorry. Even if I do the same thing over and over again, forgiveness means no consequences. And if you, as his wife, start to have some new boundaries or implement negative consequences, he will now accuse you of abusing and harming him. He will tell others, I can't trust her. In other words, Now you've become the bad person, the hard-hearted one, the one who's unforgiving and mutually abusive. He harmed you, but now somehow he's flipped it around that you've harmed him too. And this is where you start to feel a little cuckoo yourself, right? And you start to get a little reactive. Wow, am I abusive? Am I harming him by my boundaries or consequences? Maybe boundaries aren't biblical. Maybe I am being mean and vindictive. What's true here? And confusion starts to reign. So let me just address this really quickly. When Proverbs says about marriage, he trusts her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life. The Bible also says love does no harm. But that doesn't mean love never hurts, because the Bible also says faithful are the wounds of a friend. In other words, sometimes the truth hurts our ego or our feelings. But the truth spoken in love is meant to help and heal us, not harm us. When your doctor tells you that you have cancer, it hurts. But his information is not meant to harm you. It's given so that you can heal. The psalmist says, let a righteous man or woman strike me. Let his rebuke be an act of loving devotion. Ephesians says, speak the truth in love. So when you set boundaries and implement consequences for sinful behavior, you have to get clarity on the difference. You are not harming your husband for putting safety measures in place for you and your children's safety and well-being. Hurt and harm are not the same thing. It's like your 2-year-old saying to you, Mommy, you're harming me, when you won't allow him to eat 10 cookies before dinner, or you won't let him kick you when he's angry and throwing a fit. You are not harming your child by stopping him. You're attempting to help him, although he doesn't know it or realize it yet because he's too immature in his thinking, as your husband is. But here's where your sanity also needs some work. What's going on in your mind? What you believe, some lies of your own. For example, a lie that God will be disappointed or angry with you if you tell or take a stand against your spouse's attitudes or actions. Or maybe that staying married is more important to God than you or your children's safety or sanity. Or maybe to be a godly wife means you're just to be silent and protect your husband's good name and suffer quietly for Jesus and just die to yourself. Or a myriad of other lies that you tell yourself, or that he tells himself, that contribute to destructive dynamics. But if your marriage is to be a relationship, a picture of Christ and his bride, what are we describing? Does a marriage relationship that's broken, full of empty promises or abusive attitudes or actions, deceptions, degrading comments, does that marriage glorify God simply because a wife silently endures? Is that the picture of Christ in the church? Not in my Bible or in yours. Is God asking you to lie and pretend, to keep up appearances of the image of a good relationship when it's all whitewash and underneath full of dead man's bones? Does this glorify God? Does this help your husband or you, your kids, or your marriage? Stop and think about that. Is that picture God's portrayal of marriage and his church? I don't think so. I believe your role as a biblical helpmate is not to prop your husband up just to enable him to continue to sin and break apart your family. It's much more risky and redemptive than that. And that's where you need to do your own work to get sane, so that you are clear that speaking up in love and speaking out against abuse, oppression, and sin, and standing up for your marriage and God's plan for marriage is not being disrespectful or ungodly. You see, safety and sanity go together. Without safety, there is no trust in a relationship. Without sanity, there's no safety, because you can't trust who the person is or what he says or does. Does that mean you don't love him? No, but unconditional love doesn't entitle someone to unconditional relationship. Jesus tells us to love our enemy, but that doesn't mean that you feel safe with your enemy. You can't, precisely because he is an enemy. You don't have a safe or trusting relationship with him or her. Jesus says it this way in Matthew 18, and I'm paraphrasing. When someone seriously sins against you, go and have a talk with him or her, because God cares about your relationship, trusting that this person will hear you. Humble yourself. Do the work to rebuild broken trust or safety. However, it doesn't just depend on you. If he refuses to listen, then what? Escalate the matter with witnesses where possible. But if you've done all you can to help someone see what they've done to bring harm to you or the relationship, then what? The relationship changes. Jesus says, treat him as you would a pagan or tax collector. So what does that mean? It means that there isn't safety or trust in that relationship. All Jewish people who were listening to Jesus knew pagans and corrupt tax collectors were not to be trusted. You see, unconditional love does not equal unconditional relationship. Marriage is not an unconditional relationship with no matter what you do or how you treat me, I'll be able to stay in a relationship with you. Now, you may choose to stay legally married, but you can't be in a healthy relationship with a person, believer or unbeliever, when there is no trust or safety. God didn't wire us that way, nor does he even do it himself. Jesus didn't have relationship with everybody, did he? He loved everybody, but he didn't have close relationship with everybody, with Judas, the Pharisees. He tells us our sin separates us from him. And until we own that and confess that and repent, God loves us. But do we have a close relationship with him? No. So why would he expect different of his people? Now, it's really important that you understand what repentance is. It's not just feeling sorry, nor is it making verbal promises. Words don't necessarily lead to changed behaviors. Remember the words I talked about before. Tomorrow I'm going to eat better. Words are easy. Changed behaviors are not so easy. John the Baptist said it best when he said, prove by the way that you live that you've repented of your sin and turned to God. So what does that look like? Well, here are some changes you want to see happening. It looks like making amends for his sinful behaviors rather than expecting amnesty. Forgiveness does not automatically mean reconciliation. A person who's truly repentant will take ownership for the pain he has caused you. In the Old Testament, it talks about amends making a lot when you've sinned against your neighbor. But even in the New Testament, Zacchaeus, the corrupt tax collector, when he came to Jesus, he said, Lord, I will give back half of my money to the poor, and everyone I've cheated, I will give them back 4 times what I've taken from them. That's called amends. No one had to tell Zacchaeus to do it. It was in his heart to do because he was repentant of his sin. It means when you're repentant, you're willing to be accountable for the damage you've caused people and willing to do the necessary work. And I was grateful for the chance to do it rather than demanding instant forgiveness or automatic reconciliation or restoration of the marriage. So what are some of the evidences of change that are going on as a result of repentance? Well, we see humility instead of pride, a willingness instead of a willfulness, gratitude instead of entitlement, a God-centered man instead of a self-centered man, a love-filled person rather than a fear-filled person, and a giver instead of a taker. So is there hope? How do you rebuild broken trust? Remember, even when you're sincere in your words, there's a big difference between what you would like to do or be and what you're willing to do to become it. Francois Fenelon says a persuaded mind, even a well-intentioned heart, is still a long way from exact and faithful practice. Words are not the same as changed behaviors. A couple of years ago, I was challenged to run a half marathon by my friend Sue in Pennsylvania. And I did, but I didn't just decide and then go run a half marathon. I decided in January. I ran the marathon in April, but I had to train myself all of January, all of February, all of March in order to be able to do what I well-intentioned desired. And so the same is true of your husband. Repeated breaks in marital trust require personal work, not just marital work. The one who broke trust must learn to become more self-aware of his choices and take responsibility for why he acts the way he acts, instead of being blind to his sin or blaming you. He must reflect on what he's done and take responsibility for it. He has to examine what he did and why he did it so that he can develop better ability to control his emotions and correct himself when he's getting controlling or abusive or tempted to abuse. So you want to see this growth in self-awareness, self-reflection, self-examination, self-control, and self-correction. If you want to rebuild broken trust, you also have to talk about where the trust has been broken, and it may have been in multiple places. Care, sexual fidelity, honesty, authenticity, reliability, financial stability, safety, all of the above. For trust to be rebuilt, you have to see that safety trust has been broken, and rebuilding safety trust always comes first before being able to rebuild any other trust. If you don't feel safe with someone, you cannot even talk with them. You cannot have a close relationship with someone if you can't trust that you're safe when you do so. So how do you test for safety trust? The quickest way to test is, do you have the freedom to say no? And is your no respected? If not, you don't have safety yet. So can I trust that you won't harm me when you get angry, hurt, frustrated, or anxious? Can I trust that you've learned how to manage your negative emotions, even when you're disappointed in me, or I don't do what you want me to do? Is it safe for me to express my thoughts and opinions and needs to you without abuse? Can I say no to you without a guilt trip, a spiritual lecture, or manipulation? Authenticity and honesty trust. Can I count on you to be the same person in public that I live with at home? Are you honest with me even when it's hard? Compassionate care trust. Can I trust that you care about my needs and feelings or goals as well as your own? Reliability trust. Can I count on you to do what you say you'll do? And if I remind you, you're grateful for a helpmate that reminds you instead of angry that I just don't leave you alone. So here's the arc of serious change. A, I'm accountable. R, I take responsibility. C, I accept consequences when I fail. Being accountable for how I behave and think and feel and act and react. No more blaming. It's not your fault. He starts to take responsibility for his own life, his thoughts, his feelings, and his growth instead of blaming or depending on you to fix everything for him. Does he know and understand and accept that when he sins, especially in your relationship, there are negative consequences and they don't go away just because he's saying sorry? Some consequences are permanent. So let's see what moving forward looks like. You've got a boatload of old history in your marriage. You want to build some new history of a better marriage, but no one builds new history perfectly. So what happens when he starts to slip back into old history? His old pattern pops up, or he gets frustrated or scary, and he's not handling himself very well. Is he taking responsibility for that? Is he even aware of that? Is he being accountable to you, to others? Has he learned to be self-aware? Ooh, I'm getting upset now. And if he's not aware of it, when you give him feedback, you're getting scary right now. Does he listen? And is he grateful for it? When you try to tell him something, does he want to listen? You know, if someone wants to grow, you have to understand the centrality of feedback in the rebuilding of broken trust. Todd Herman says high performers are not afraid to look at the replay. Every top athlete, and even every top wannabe athlete, looks at the replay of their golf swing, takes video of their volleyball hit, looks at the football game and sees what they did wrong and what they could do better. When they look at the replay, are they willing and open and teachable, or argumentative and defensive and closed? Here's some of the benefits of feedback. It gives you greater clarity and greater self-awareness like a mirror does. And it helps you correct your mistakes and learn from them so you don't keep repeating them. The Bible tells us the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. And Hebrews tells us exhort one another day after day as long as it's called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. This is why a helpmate has to speak up. So don't be fooled, friend. Charm, he's fun, he's charismatic, he's good with words, confident, affectionate. Character, he's honest and loyal, reliable, humble, faithful. What do you want? Old history, ignoring, avoiding, denying, blaming, and repeats. New history, he receives the feedback, he's self-aware, he reflects, he learns to control himself, and he corrects when you give him feedback. So, what does new history look like? The ability to recognize and own his problem. He sees it clearly. He takes responsibility for it. He's willing to hear your feedback. He respects and cares for you, creating new safety and sanity. And he's willing to work over the long term. No more entitlement thinking. And that creates the safety and stability. So, is the change real? Do you see him accountable to authority and to you? Do you see him responsible? And he demonstrates that in his actions. Do you see him accepting consequences of his poor choices, attitudes, or actions without blaming others? If you see those things, then practice and patience with the process will bring healing. So, a lot to process here, but let me give you just a few more things that you need to work on for yourself. You see, you need to do your own work as well if you want to have a healthy relationship. So, first, stop pretending. You need to move out of denial and into the truth. Put your marriage in its proper place. So many women are man-centered women. They're marriage-centered women, but God wants you to be a God-centered woman. Take your marriage out of first place in your heart and put it where it belongs. Not at last place, but put God in his proper place. Third, build your core strength. What is that? CORE is an acronym that I developed. You're committed to truth now. No more pretending. You're open to learning and growing and changing yourself. You're going to be responsible for yourself too, and respectful toward others without dishonoring yourself, and empathetic and compassionate toward others without enabling destructive behavior to continue. You need to educate yourself on healthy and unhealthy relationship patterns, just like you're doing right now. Stop isolating to get the support you need. And let go of the outcome of your marriage. Be the person God calls you to be, and then give it to God. I want you to know something very important. You can be a godly woman, a godly wife, but you can't make a good marriage all by yourself. God does not care more about the sanctity of marriage than he does about the safety and sanity of the people in it. So, you've listened to all this. Here you are. Whether you like it or not, what do you need to do? Margaret Wheatley says, without reflection, we just go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. So I would like to invite you to do something different. I'd like to introduce you to Conquer. Conquer is a support and educational group that can really help you hear from God in a new way, live from a place of strength and help and not desperation, get stronger and more confident to stop being victimized again and again, steer clear of manipulative games and crazy-making conversations, and gain the freedom from bitterness and resentment. Conquer is a perfect fit for you if you're a woman. We don't let any men in, sorry. You're sick and tired of being stuck and feeling helpless and afraid. You don't like who you're becoming in this destructive marriage, and you're ready to grow and become all God has for you. And you're ready to invest in yourself for a change. Shelley says, today I'm no longer that wounded woman in a withering relationship, thanks to Conquer and the work of the Holy Spirit. I was wonderfully made, and I am wonderfully restored, and so is my marriage, although both are works in progress. I am a woman of worth, a warrior, better equipped for emotional and spiritual battle in this world. I'm not crushed by my fears. I conquer my fears. I'm not defeated by my circumstances. I'm victorious because I've learned to conquer, not cower. Lori says this, Conquer really helped me as I've been separated from my husband since August 2014. And I've struggled with guilt that I couldn't work on my issues very well living with him. But I realize that sometimes we have to step away to see the picture clear. I am seeing myself clear, what I need to work on. Thanks for the teaching. So when you join Conquer, immediately you're going to start a journey. It's called your Conquer Journey. Right now you're at step 0, awakening. Oh my gosh, trust has been broken. We're really not rebuilding trust. I need safety. I need safety, both emotionally, maybe physically, maybe financially, sexually, spiritually. How do I get it? We're going to take you through some teaching on what God's word says about your right to safety. God cares about your safety. And then we're going to move to clarity. What does the Bible say about abuse? What does the Bible say about separation if I have to separate? What does the Bible say about divorce? So I'm crystal clear, so I don't get confused, so I don't get guilty, so I don't do the wrong thing. And then how do I get stable? How do I get strong so I don't get so crazy inside and so feeling so reactive? And then how do I build my core strength so I can stand tall and then get strong and confident? You know, the Bible says that a woman, of Proverbs 31 woman, is a woman, she clothes herself in strength and dignity. And because of that, she can smile at the future unafraid. So Conquer starts there. It doesn't end there. We've got a whole library full of things, but we're going to start with your Conquer journey. And Wanda says, this group has been a blessing from God at the worst time of my life. The support has been phenomenal from women who truly understand what you're going through. The fact that Leslie even responds to a Facebook post is amazing. The monthly calls have been tremendous help to me. And now we have 2 calls a month. And these calls are truly wonderful coaching sessions. I feel like Leslie's wisdom, compassion, and Christian heart is displayed on each phone call. I'm thankful she's made all this available no matter where you live. And Kathy said this, it's so helpful to know that there are so many others sharing our experience. This is really crucial, ladies. Not exactly, but similarly. And it gives me the courage to face another day. The resources available through the experiences of others on this site are absolutely priceless. When one doesn't know which way to turn, others do. And the prayer support and focus on doing the right thing, even though it's hard or scary, is incredible. I am so grateful for this place to share my frustrations and help and encourage others. So if you join Conquer, here's what you get. Every month, you'll get 2 short video teachings with handouts so you can immediately put into practice what you've learned. Oftentimes, Conquer ladies get together when they get to meet each other, and they do these together. Each month, we also get on the phone together, and we have 90 minutes where we can talk, and I can answer your questions and coach you through some struggles that you're having. And these calls are recorded, so if you can't make it, or you want to listen again and again, or you want to go back and listen to all of them, you can. There is a private secret Facebook group that only Conquer women are allowed to be on, and you connect with other women and get support day or night. And also everything else that I do in terms of coaching, you get reduced prices and you get first dibs into the classes. They fill up fast. And so when we do coaching groups and other kinds of things, you get first opportunity to join them. Also, if you join in the next 24 hours, right after this webinar, I am going to do a special group call just with newbies on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to be in Nashville, so I'm going to take an hour of my time to get you on board right away. And so if you join quickly so that we can do a small little phone call with how many other people join, that would be great. Imagine Lori says, I love your biblical teaching in all aspects, but the thing I appreciate about you most when listening to you speak with others is your amazing ability to respond to any conflict with a toxic person in such an effective yet compassionate and loving way, regardless of the circumstances. So imagine how you would feel if you could speak the truth in love. Take responsibility for yourself by being respectful toward your husband, if you knew how to do that. If you could recognize the destructive patterns quickly and respond in a firm, godly way instead of getting all confused. If you could establish appropriate boundaries and consequences and you knew how to do that. You learn how to make good choices and follow through with those choices for yourself, and learn how to use your voice and express it honestly and respectfully, and found the courage to say out loud, I won't live like this anymore. That's amazing. So here's what the membership site looks like for those of you who are computer phobic like I am. I thought I would just show you a couple things. So you would log into a special private membership site. Here's where you are going to get a login and gain access. You'll have a password. And then you'll go up to here where it says Conquer Programs, and you'll just click that on. And then you'll have all these little cute buttons that you can start the Conquer journey. You can look at different videos. You can do, so it's very simple. I didn't design, are you kidding? But I had it designed with me in mind for me who doesn't understand all of that. And it feels very scary. It's easy to work and it's easy to get through. Plus we have lots of tech support for you. And so I just want you to see that it's very simple. You can see how far you've gone. It tells you how many videos you've watched. And so I would just like you to think about this. How would you like to feel the support and love from other women who know what your life is like and believe your story, who laugh together even during the hard things and find joy even in a destructive marriage, who will pray for you regularly and teach you to connect with God in new and deeper ways for the cost of less than a cup of coffee a day at Starbucks? It's only $27 a month. Or if you choose to buy for the year, it's $270 with 2 months free. And you can cancel anytime with 30 days notice. So what does that sound like to you? And also, as a special bonus, I did this last time and I'm going to do this again because it was so helpful. I'm going to personally, I don't coach anybody anymore privately, but I am going to personally coach you through your Conquer journey. And you're going to walk through it with me and my team. We're going to do a 6-week Conquer journey on our private Facebook page to get you started right away. Each week, starting as soon as, right at the end of October, as soon as Conquer's closed, each week I'm going to review with you what you've learned and answer your questions. And our coaches will also be active in the Facebook group so you can get feedback and help and prayer fast. Second bonus, I have a book that is not available to anyone but those in Conquer. It's called Before You Say I Don't. This book was written by myself and my friend Marianne Modesti, who is a family law attorney, a godly woman in Pennsylvania. And this is a book that you must look at and read if you're thinking about separating or thinking about hiring an attorney. It is chock full of what you must know before you plunk down a $2,500 retainer to an attorney that's not going to help you. It's what you need to do to separate, how you need to separate, what ways you need to separate, how you need to separate safely. The price of this book is priceless because who wants to waste money on an attorney that's not going to work out for you? So if you are in that place, I would encourage you to join Conquer, even if you're not sure about it, just to get the book. And you can always leave Conquer if it's not for you. We had some people do that last time and they said, oh my gosh, Conquer's been great. But they joined to get the book, not for any other reason. But this is the only way you can get this book. And the third book is Walking in Her Shoes. This is an ebook, a compilation of some of the most widely read, commented on, and forwarded blogs that I wrote over the years that answer the toughest questions regarding abuse in marriage. And these are really helpful for you, especially if you have to defend yourself with your church. Suffering, boundaries, consequences, all the things that conservative church leaders tell you that are unbiblical or you're being a bad woman for doing that. It'll really help clarify the confusion, the spiritual confusion that happens to you. So, are you ready to begin? We would love to have you a part of our Conquer journey and Conquer membership. So, if you want to sign up for Conquer, just go to leslievernick.com/Conquer sign up and we will get you started right away. Don't forget, if you sign up today, I'm going to be having a phone call with you on Thursday right away to answer your questions. You don't have to wait. And you can get started on your Conquer journey right away. All right, so now we're going to move back to Q&A. Those of you who stayed, now you will get your special bonus, which is a special handout. It's a kind of an infographic on some of the key points that we talked about today that will be really helpful for you to have in your possession so you can remember things. And I'm going to move back out of slide mode and into, I've just turned back on the chat. Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to turn off the screen share. And I'm going to turn back on the camera. And we're going to move full size. Oh, thank you, Jesus. You don't know the anxiety that I have every time I push a button that I'm not exactly sure if it's going to like go the right place. So now that we're over with that, I can just relax. I can have a sip of my coffee, although I'm probably cold now. Anyway, I want to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat or the Q&A place. Thank you so much for listening. So we're going to help tons of questions. Are we going to be able to view this again? There are things I didn't get to write down all the way. You will get a link for a replay tomorrow, I think, and I'm pretty sure. And it'll be available for only a limited time. So please watch it again. I think there's a ton of value in this webinar. Somebody recently asked me about some things I spoke on around this a little bit and around some other things. And they said, is this in writing? Is this in writing? Have you written a book about it? No, I haven't, because these are things I've really fleshed out in the last couple of years as I've really been struggling with people who want to repair their relationship. What's required? And this is gold. This is really important stuff. And if your counselor is trying to do something other than that, like date nights and all that, it's like trying to give an antibiotic to someone who has lung cancer. It's not going to work. So know that. Knowledge is power, girlfriend. And if you need that support and that knowledge, Conquer is an amazing group that gets together. We're going to have a conference next year in Dallas together just for Conquer people. So that we can meet in person, we can continue to learn and grow. There's a library full of videos like why you shouldn't give your husband a list, of changes he needs to make, and why is that dangerous and why is that not smart. And I'm not going to tell you why. You have to join Conquer to find out why. But we have videos on post-traumatic growth. We have videos on learned helplessness. We have videos on separation. We have all kinds of staying well. If you want to stay well, how do you do that? What's required? If you want to leave well, how do you do that? What's required? So there's tons of information in there in small 10-minute one-step bites so that you don't get overwhelmed. Nobody wants to get overwhelmed, but we want to learn in small bites so that we can apply what we're learning in this community of girls, friends, wonderful women, Christian women who want the same thing you do, and they're in the same place you are. So you don't feel so embarrassed talking about how awful it is. You don't feel so embarrassed saying that, I'm having a breakdown here. I need help. It's hard to tell your maybe girlfriend at church that because maybe she won't believe you. We will believe you. We understand. All right. Adele said, you mentioned you would answer the question, how long do you wait for your abusive spouse to change? I did not hear the answer in this session. So I'm not going to say to you, wait a year. What I'm going to say is don't wait if you don't see those changes. If you don't see this happening, if you don't see him learning to be taking responsibility for himself and accepting that he has to do the work, it's not the marriage work first. If you don't see that, why would you wait? You know it's not going to change. Nothing's going to change if he doesn't do that. If he's doing that and you see that he's willing to receive your feedback, that he's willing to be accountable, that he's surrounded himself with accountability partners, that he is rebuilding trust, he is reliable, he is showing you care, he is being honest, then I would say wait as long as you see those things. If you see those things happening, then be gracious and wait. And if he slips into old history, which he might, because we all do, if we say, I'm never going to eat donuts again, and I eat donuts, a month now, I might slip. And then what do I need to do to get back on track? Is he getting back on track quickly? Is he listening to your feedback? If that's all happening, great. Then continue to move forward and try and build that trust, right? If you don't see any of that, and you're clear, you're saying to him, hey, you've broken my trust. You need to rebuild trust for our relationship to be repaired. You don't get the perks of a warm, loving relationship. Our relationship is broken. Yes, we're still married. When it's sort of like an ER, when the patient is like, you're pumping their heart or you're shocking them because they've, how long do you keep going? There's a time and then you call it, so I can't call that time for you when we say the marriage is dead. But if someone isn't willing to do the work that I outlined here, The marriage is dying and it will be dead. Only you can call the time of death. Divorce isn't killing the marriage. Divorce is the death certificate that says the marriage is dead, right? And so if your husband, or if you're a guy listening to this and your wife, if that's not happening, if they're not doing their own work and they're saying, well, we have to do marriage counseling. No, the marriage counseling is next. The first part is they have to do their own work to find out what's going on inside of them that they felt entitled to act that way. They felt entitled to do that they have those habit patterns of control or oppression, whatever it is that's destructive in your relationship. They have to do that work first. If they're not even doing that, then understand the marriage is not going to be repaired. You might have seasons of calm, all right? In the abuse cycle, there's a calm part, but it's still the same cycle. Nothing's changing. You're just going to rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And so only you can decide whether in your setting, whatever it is, whether you're going to stay well for other reasons, not to hope he changes or the marriage, but you're going to stay well because you've got little kids and he would be totally irresponsible with the children if he had 50% custody and you're afraid of that. And so you stay in the home, not expecting the marriage to be any different than it is. You have your boundaries, you have your safety things, you do what you need to do to take care of you. And that's why it's so important to be with other women who understand that so they can give you some tips that way. But that you are part of that thing and you stay well, not to hope the marriage repairs, but that you stay well in order to give your kids a chance to get a little bigger, or for you to get educated so you can get a job or whatever it is that you need to do. But you're not staying trying to work on the marriage. If he's not, so many women keep trying and trying and trying and trying, and you're over functioning and you're allowing him to under function and believe that it's your job to fix it. You can't fix it all by yourself. I need guidance when the abuse is mostly aimed at my children. Youngest son is 13 and hubby is emotionally abusive to him regularly and sometimes physically abusive. I made him move out 5 weeks ago. Is it time to divorce to protect my kids? Well, good for you, Melody. I think it's our job to protect our children from abusers, including a spouse, if they are abusive to our kids. And so good that you made him move out. So now what's he doing? Is he owning it? Is he taking responsibility for it? Is he getting help for it? Is he working on himself? Does he show any signs of repentance? Or is he just angry at you and blaming you for ruining his life, which is often what happens. If that's where he's at, then he's not changing. And maybe that's your next step. So I'm never telling someone to get a divorce. That's not my place. It's your life. You have to live with the consequences of what you do. And so get wise advice. But let me just say this for others who might be in your situation. If as a mom, you don't take measures to protect your child, and then later on, you try to get a protective order, or you say abuse was in the marriage or whatever, and you never did anything. First of all, they're not going to believe you, because if he was that abusive, why did you let him treat your kids that way, right? And second of all, if the teacher calls or someone else calls, or your child starts telling people at school and the teacher calls Children Protective Services, you may lose custody of your child because you didn't protect them. So it's very important that, especially if there's any physical abuse, that you stand and protect your child. Because the worst thing for a child is not just to be abused by a parent, but for the bystanding parent to be silent. That's why I'm so angry, and so righteously so, at the church leaders, because they can see a woman's being abused and they are silent to the abuser. So when a bully bullies, studies show this, when a bully bullies school children, and the bystanders, the other kids, stick up for the bullied and say to the bully, you can't act that way around here. We don't treat people like that here. You can't come to the school anymore. Go away. We weren't going to play with you. Right? When they stand up for the bullied, guess what? The bully loses his power. It's like the Wizard of Oz. All of a sudden it becomes deflated. He's not so big anymore. But when the bully bullies and the bystanders, the Christian counselor, the pastor, is silent because they're afraid if they speak up to him, he'll, won't come back, and he won't. But they're silent, then they hurt the person who's being abused. So when children are being abused by a parent and the other parent is the silent parent, that hurts your kids deeply because you didn't protect them. So good for you. My husband has said he is miserable, unhappy, and tired of working on the relationship. But I think he wants me to make the call to separate because it will make him look like the victim, and he can use that against me when I ask for spousal support because our state is a no-fault state. I've been refusing. Well, if you have a no-fault state, then he can't use it against you because there really isn't any fault in a no-fault state. So he can't use that, at least he can't legally. He might be able to use it against you in the church, but legally he can't use that against you because there's, in a no-fault state, it's just a formula. It's not, oh, he did this or you did this. That's why you need an attorney. I've been refusing to make that call, but it's getting harder emotionally to stay when he ignores me, has no physical contact with me, has taken me off of our joint account altogether. I get a small allowance. He doesn't see his behavior as emotional abuse. Should I temporarily separate? Well, I guess I wonder why you're staying. So are you staying hoping he's going to change his mind? He's already told you he doesn't want to work on the relationship. So I think it might be helpful to say to him, I hear you. I hear you don't want to work on us. I hear you're done. I hear you're tired. So where do you want to go from here? All right. So it can be more of a mutual decision. And maybe he'll say, well, let's, and okay, how do you want to tell the kids? What do you want to say to the kids? I'm okay with that. Let's figure out how to do that. Instead of begging him to be in a relationship with you, he doesn't want to, put it out on the table. But ask him to be mutually responsible for this decision. Not in those words, but what do you want to do? I hear you. So what? What do you want to do? And see what he wants to do. Do you want to continue living like this with both of us miserable? Is that the best way to spend our next 20 years? Is that what you want to do? And then if he says, yeah, because I don't want to have to pay you spousal support, then I would say, what do you want to do? Right? What do you want to do? And I certainly, the very first step I would do is I would get a legal consult of what are your rights financially in the state that you live in. If it's a no-fault state, it doesn't matter what the person has done. It doesn't really matter if he's committed adultery or if you left or he left. No fault is no fault. So there's a formula, but it depends on how long you've been married and how capable you are of earning a living and all those kind of things. And I'm not in a position to tell you that, but I think you do need to get some information before you make that decision. And that would be financial information from an attorney about what your laws say in your state. What if everyone around you says it's all in your head? You're just imagining it. Well, I don't know. Is it? You have to decide that, right? You have to decide. So one of the things that we encourage women to do in Conquer is document. So especially if there's any physical abuse, document pictures. If there's holes in walls, financial records that show, irresponsible spending. If he's saying things that are more covert, I think that, without you giving more specifics, I can't really, I think sometimes we do make up stories in our head. So there's some truth to making up stories about things in our head that may not be true. So what you want to look at is look at the facts. Try not to create the story about it. So the facts are, he hits me. The facts are, he kicked the dog. The fact is, he did not pay the taxes. The facts are, he stayed out all night and didn't call me. The facts are, he refuses to talk to me for 2 weeks. The facts are, so I would like you to make a list of facts, all right? Instead of, I feel he doesn't love me. I feel he, wants me out of his life. I feel like he's looking at other people, but you have no facts. I want you to try to see what facts, even if they're just teeny facts. I want you to look, even if it's like a paper cut fact or a bee sting fact, I want you to write down the facts, and that will help give you clarity, all right? With a history of lying about pornography addiction, how do you know if he's still lying, even though he seems repentant and is now accountable and open? Well, oftentimes what a woman feels comfortable with is a lie detector test. So that may be something that you would ask him to do, to say, hey, in order to rebuild trust, you've had such a history of lying. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to take a lie detector test, once or twice as we're rebuilding broken trust, just to give me peace of mind. And see if he's willing to do that. If he is, then that's a good sign. Why wouldn't he be willing to take a lie detector test if he's being honest, right? And so to be able to talk about that, does he lie in other areas of your life? Those would be things. Do you have access to his computer? So if you were to, in a moment, say, in order to build trust, it would be really helpful to me if I could, look at your computer. So can you open up your recents and let me see what you've been watching and what you've been looking at? Is he willing to do that? Those would be ways that you would be able to tell, okay? What's the difference between taking responsibility for your husband's action plan and setting expectations of what you're saying needs to change? Good question, Cindy. I think that it's a big difference. So here's what I think, that I need to be in a relationship with someone I can trust. I need to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't hit me or hurt me. I need a relationship with someone who shares power. In other words, I need a relationship where I'm not cut out of the finances, that I have access to what they are, where they are, and to be able to have mutual decision making in them. I need a relationship with someone who doesn't watch pornography. So I think you can say what you need in order to have a healthy, strong relationship with someone. And then he can decide whether or not he wants to do any of that, right? Or how he's going to do any of that. But for you to say, here's the name of a counselor, you need to go to counseling, that's controlling him, all right? And if you say that, he'll go check the box off and say, I did what you wanted, and it's still not good enough, is it? So you just put yourself in a box. So you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to give him tasks to do. You want to describe the character qualities or the traits of a person that you could trust. In those 5 areas, what is it that you need from him? And then see what he does to create that, or choose not to. Does that help? All right. He doesn't do what he oops, I lost it. I don't know where it went. I think it's down. Nope, okay. We lost that question. I'll try to find it in a minute. My husband is a wonderful man who wants to help everyone else. He puts our family last, which causes us not to feel safe. And I don't trust him because he doesn't do what he promises, because he helps others first. I feel selfish for wanting him to put his family first. Is that wrong? No. Short answer. So my guess is that your husband feels very validated by other people when he's such a hero to them, and he's feeding off of that, and that is helping him feel like a big guy and a wonderful person, versus just working at home and maybe he doesn't get all the kudos he wants from being such a hero to so many different people. And so I think it's not selfish for you to say, put your own oxygen mask on first so that you can help other people, right? It's not that you put your own oxygen mask on and just stay in your seat and, say, leave me alone, where the plane's going down. You put your own oxygen mask so you can help children, so you can help elderly, so that you can help people who can't help themselves. And so he's not being the kind of man that he wants to be. So I would try to talk to him in this way. And you'll learn all these things in Conquer. I teach women when I'm on the phone. We do this kind of thing all the time. I coach with them, or my coaches coach with them. And so I would start with this kind of sentence. I would speak to the man that he seems to want to be, which is a wonderful, loving, kind man. So those are the character qualities that you're saying he displays to other people. So I would say to him, I see that you are a generous, kind, sacrificial, loving man. And I admire that. And I love that about you. But what I don't understand is why you wouldn't want your children and me to see that same man here. That you are indifferent to, our toilet's been broke for 3 weeks and you haven't even looked at it. Our kids want to have you at their ball game and you're busy helping Mr. Smith build his garage. Our kids are asking you to help them with their homework and you're falling asleep because you stayed up all night doing XYZ. So I would give specifics and say, I want our kids to see you as a wonderful, honorable hero guy, not just Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones or John over here, your brother over there. I want our kids to experience you that way. And I don't think that's selfish. I think that's right. And I'm concerned that your priorities, let's do your work here first and help our kids know you that way. And if you have extra time to do that, great. But I think I'd like you to focus on taking care of us a little bit more. Why don't you? Right? And let him see if he can reflect and listen to your feedback. Can he examine himself? Can he be aware of why would I do all that? Why am I such a hero to everybody else? And it's not uncommon. And see if he can do that and repent. But it's not about you being selfish. All right. So here's where I think a helpmate can be really helpful in a marriage where you can give him that feedback. Maybe he's not aware that he's doing that. And so if you're not even going to tell him, he's never going to be aware. If your husband had a zipper going down, on his way to work, you'd certainly tell him, right? Why don't you tell him other things that you see that maybe need to be corrected so that he can be the man he wants to be? How can I encourage my husband to come clean and tell me all the things he has been involved with so we can move forward? I don't see how we can start to heal. You can't. So here's the deal. I need you to come clean. I can forgive anything, but I can't live with a liar. So if you don't want to come clean and tell me everything and have a full disclosure, they're called full disclosures, then I don't know how we can go forward, because I don't want to live with someone I can't trust. All right. So then he can decide, I'm going to tell you or I'm not going to tell you. Right? I'm going to give you a full disclosure. I'm not going to give you a full disclosure. And then you decide. So I think here's where it's so hard. And I'm not saying that you can't choose to live with a liar if you choose to, but it doesn't make for a good relationship. Is it silly or foolish to say I reject my husband's lack of focusing on how bad our marriage relationship is and not reject him? Not reject him. Is it silly or foolish to say I reject my husband's lack of focus on how bad our marriage is and not reject him? I'm not sure what you mean, Betty, not reject him. I don't think we need to reject anybody. We just may not be able to be in a good relationship with them. So when we reject somebody, I'm seeing you say like a strong cut off, no contact kind of thing. I think to be able to say, I love you. I wish we had a better. See, here's where we stop lying and pretending, right? So if your husband's saying, let's, I don't know if he wants some of the perks of a relationship that you just can't do because the relationship isn't there. The relationship isn't there. And so to be able to say, I love you. I wish we could have a great relationship. I think I've done my part to see if we could have one. I can't do your part. I can't do your part. Right? It's like trying to run a 3-legged race with somebody who doesn't want to run. If you're tied in the ankles, you can't drag a dead body, right? You can't make them run a 3-legged race with you if they won't. And so so then you decide, so this stops you in your tracks. You can't keep running because you're tied at the ankles. So do you need to not reject them, but to loosen your rope so that you have a little bit more freedom to do what you want to do in life or whatever, but he's not coming with because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. You can't make someone want to. You can't make someone be in a relationship with you, even when you're married to them, right? And that's, I think, the big missing piece in Christendom when we talk about marriage. Is marriage really a relationship, or is it just a legal agreement? If marriage is just a legal agreement, then you hate each other and you stay together. You bite and devour each other and you stay together. But Paul says, stop biting and devour each other. You'll destroy each other. You destroy the relationship. The relationship becomes destroyed if the relationship is a living thing. Right? If it's just a contract, and I don't think that's what the Bible teaches, then you just duke it out and grit it out till the end. And what does that glorify God? I think you have to decide that. All right. What do I do if he says that my boundaries are pushing him away while we're separated? Well, so healthy people, when they get some feedback, so your husband's giving you feedback, your boundaries are pushing me away. So you have to ask yourself, well, what are my boundaries? So if my boundaries are, I don't want you to call me after 10 o'clock at night because I'm going to bed, or right now, I don't want to have any contact with you until you go to counseling and do your work, or until you decide what you want to do your work to get better, or I don't know what your boundaries are. But boundaries are for you. They're not about pushing someone else out. They're for you, for your safety and your sanity, for your self-stewardship. Right? So your whole body is a boundary, your skin. Okay, your skin is a boundary. Very few things can get into your insides. They have a couple little holes that help you get, help things get in, bad things to get in. But God has given your skin as a boundary to protect your inner organs, right? He's given you your skeleton around your heart and your ribs to protect those things against injury and harm. Your skull is real hard to protect your brain inside. And so boundaries are for your safety, stewardship, protection, not to push someone away. So that would be the question I would ask you is he saying that? Is it saying, what are your boundaries? And if your boundaries are to help you stay sane and safe, then yeah. So if a robber says, well, locking your door is pushing me away. Of course it is, because I'm going to lock my door to keep myself safe from you, because you're going to come in and hurt me. I'm not going to let that happen. So I'm not going to just leave my door open. It's not selfish to lock your door because the robber wants to come in and steal your stuff, right? Or it's not wrong for you to carry your purse over your shoulder in a crowded area. That's a boundary that you're going to put around your neck so that it's less likely that you're going to be robbed of your purse, right? So for you to protect yourself with a boundary is not pushing someone away unless they want to do you harm, right? So I don't know what your boundary is. And sometimes we put boundaries in the wrong way. So in Conquer, you learn all about boundaries. We have tons of videos on boundaries. How do I encourage my husband to get help for possible PTSD? I'm sure you've already tried, right? So I'm sure you've already said to him, honey, I think you could use some help for your PTSD because it's affecting our marriage. That would be the first step, all right? It's your anger, your fear, you're waking up in the middle of the night with bad dreams, you're not getting enough sleep, whatever the symptoms are that it's affecting your marriage. I would describe them, and then I would say, I think you need to get some help for that. Just like if you saw a big mole growing on his face that was big and black, I think you would say to your spouse, I think you need to go to the doctor about that. This might be melanoma. I don't want you to die. But you can't make him go. He is, and if you make him go, which you might be able to make him go, you can't make him get treatment, right? So here's where I think we overfunction as wives, and we take responsibility for something that's not ours to take. I'm not saying be indifferent and say, well, then die. I'm not saying do that. What I'm saying is that we have to understand our limitations. So in the Last Supper, Jesus, it says, showed his disciples the full extent of his love, even Judas. He washed Judas's feet. He knew what Judas was going to do. He washed his feet. He was kind. He was loving. That's who Jesus was, right? During the Last Supper, he had a conversation with Judas. All right. A little bit of it's recorded. I'm sure it was longer than that. Judas still did what he was going to do. Jesus didn't convince him otherwise. All right. And so I think that we have to know our limitations. And Jesus didn't beat himself up because he couldn't convince Judas, right? So I think that here's where you need to understand that if your husband chooses not to get help for his PTSD, and his PTSD is impacting you in a negative way, just like if somebody had a brain tumor and they were because they were schizophrenic and they weren't taking their medicine. They refused to take their medicine. So because they weren't taking their medicine, they were running around the house in a paranoid delusion with a knife and scaring you, right? How can I convince my husband to take his medicine? Well, tell him, hey, we can't live like this. If you don't take your medicine, it's too scary to live like this. And if he doesn't take his medicine, then what? Well, then the consequences are, we don't live with you. We don't live with you. We love you. We can't live with you. All right. So if words don't work, consequences might. You've lost the privilege of us living with you if you don't live safely. Safety creates trust. Trust and safety go together. My husband, if he shows no fruit of the Spirit, which leads me to wonder if he's a Christian, even though he gets mad if he's asked, is it my Christian role to stay to lead him to Christ? Well, certainly your behavior, it says, if Peter, it says, win them without a word, right? So without a word, you don't know if you're going to win him to Christ. Jesus didn't win everybody to Christ. Jesus didn't win everybody to God, right? And you're not the only person God can use to help your husband see Jesus. But I do think that it depends on why you would leave, right? So if your husband is oppressive and violent and destructive and harmful, and you're not safe or your children aren't safe, you can also show him Christ-likeness by having a boundary and leaving and saying, I love you too much to continue to allow you to ruin our marriage and our children's future and our life by your behavior. I'm moving out. Hopefully you will get help for this and we can reconcile, right? So your behavior, I'm not putting up with this. I have to call the police or whatever it is, because words don't work. Words don't work anymore, right? Your actions do. That's why it's so important to build that core strength, because we can do some actions in cruelty and revenge, and we can do some actions that may hurt him right now. I can't tell you the number of men who have said to me, the only way I woke up was when my wife left me. That thank you for encouraging her to do that, because otherwise I would have continued my destructive behavior. The only thing that woke me up was that I was going to lose everything, right? That I was going to lose that lie. I'm entitled to do everything I want with no accountability, no responsibility. That lie got shattered. Oh, I'm going to lose everything. I'm not entitled to do everything. There is responsibility. There is consequences. As long as we prop up the dysfunction and we allow it, whether someone's a Christian or not a Christian, as long as I'm not talking about minor stuff. I'm talking about deal-breaking stuff, things that are serious, not just he didn't pick up his laundry, right? I'm talking about really serious sins. As long as we stay silent and prop someone up, how are they going to change, right? It's only when they hit the bottom, when their world collapses, some people wake up, and even sometimes they don't. But we can't control whether they do or they don't. We can just do the things, sort of like with your kids, all right? You can create an environment for them that it's more likely that they do their homework. Like they're not allowed on their iPad, they don't watch TV, they have to sit at the table. But they can sit at the table and they can draw and they can daydream, and you can't make them do their homework. You just create an environment where it's more likely that they will do their homework, right? In the same way, with your spouse, you create an environment that it's more likely that he will wake up. You can't make sure he wakes up. You can't wake him up. Even Jesus didn't wake up the Pharisees. Please don't put that burden on yourself. What if you feel all the changes he says he's making are all with the motive of getting you back to come home? Well, this is a really important point that I want to make. So how do I say this? All right. So this is a story that I'll tell that is fresh on my mind because my 50th high school class reunion is coming up. So for my 40th high school class reunion 10 years ago, I decided I was going to lose some weight because I didn't want to go to this class reunion having anybody think, oh, she's put on a few pounds. That's been an issue for my whole life. So I lost, I think, 10 or 15 pounds before my class reunion. I felt great. I got a new dress. Didn't have anybody say I look chubby or middle-aged. I mean, I did look middle-aged, but older than middle-aged, but I didn't look chubby. And I was happy with that. But as soon as I got back from my reunion, now I can eat my stuff again, right? So it was a change, but it was a temporary change to achieve a desired result, right? It wasn't, I'm going to eat healthy from now on. It's, I'm going to lose the weight in order for me to achieve a goal that is over with. So this is what happens when the goal becomes, I'm going to change to get you back, right? So this is where his own work is really important, to be able to say, I'm not sure you're doing this for the right reason. I want to make sure that this is the person you want to be. So in Conquer, we talk a lot about a concept called your big circle or your identity, right? Your identity. Who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be an honest person? Do you want to be a faithful person? Do you want to be a responsible person? If that's who you want to be, whether or not I stay with you or not, you're going to do this work. If you're just doing these things so that I'll take you back, but you don't really want to be those people, you don't really want those qualities, then if you come back, you're just going to let that go because now we're back and I'm not going to want to be with you again. So why would we keep going around that merry-go-round? Right? And so it's really important. And also for all of you in Conquer, we teach this a lot. Who is the person you want to be? What kind of story do you want to write about your life? And are you going to be proud of you in the story? Sometimes the stories, we can't control all the characters, can't control all the circumstances, right? Joseph couldn't when he was thrown into jail. He couldn't control Potiphar. He couldn't control Potiphar's wife. Couldn't control his brothers. He couldn't control whether he went to jail. But he wrote the story he wanted to write that he was proud of about himself in jail, right? And then other people noticed the character he was developing, and he got promoted to Pharaoh's right-hand man. Now, I'm saying that happens to everybody. What I'm saying is everybody writes a story. You're going to write a story of your life, and you're going to write a story of your moment, and you're going to write a story of today. So today, what's the story going to be? Are you going to say, wow, this is something I need more help with. I need to do my own work. Instead of all these questions are really focused on your husband. You notice that? What do I do for him? What do I do for him? What do I do today? Conquer's about you. Conquer is, what do I need to do for me? What do I need to do to set better boundaries? What do I need to do to speak more clearly? What do I need to do to change me so I don't react and retaliate? What do I need to do so I don't react and get depressed and suicidal? What do I need to do to steward me? Not my marriage right now, but me. Doesn't mean I don't care about my marriage, but if you're stronger inside, then you will be wiser in the way you handle this situation and your marriage and have better idea of what works and what doesn't work and what to do and what not to do. Because believe me, I've been in this work a long time. If you don't do your work, what's going to happen is whether you stay married or don't stay married, you're going to stay unhealthy. So now you've got your husband who's unhealthy, you stay unhealthy, and you have another generation of unhealthy children. Is that what you want for them? What's it going to cost your kids if you don't do your work and you don't get healthy and you don't grow and you don't learn to put your marriage in its proper place? What are you teaching your daughter? What are you teaching your son? What are you allowing your son to see how a husband treats a wife? These are all really important questions that you need to ask yourself. For $27 a month, it's a bargain of all you're getting, really. I mean, how much does therapy cost? How much? And we don't get therapy in Concord. It's an educational support group. But you get a lot of therapeutic teaching that will help you if you want it. And I think it's time for you to invest in you and not be so focused right now in this moment of changing your husband. You cannot change him. You can influence him, but sometimes you influence him better by you changing you as he sees you getting stronger, as he sees you getting firmer in what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, what you're going to take and what you're not going to take. That begins to cause him to feel a little bit more anxious that you're not going to, that his lies aren't going to work anymore, right? Which is a good thing for him. That opens the door to a little fresh air that might come in for him. If you are separated and your spouse gets involved with another person, is it cheating? Absolutely. Absolutely. You haven't decided about your marriage yet. You are in a marriage relationship legally. Even if you haven't divorced yet, you're separated, you're not functioning as a marriage, but absolutely. And so that's one of the things we really work on in Conquer is how do you make sure you keep your side of the street clean? Because it's tempting on both sides to just numb your pain with another relationship, right? Numb your pain with someone who pays attention to you. Numb your pain with someone who's nice to you. Numb your pain with, getting out of one relationship, getting into another one, and without doing your work, it's probably going to be another unhealthy one. How do you even start a conversation about seeing change? My spouse won't listen to anything I say as soon as I start giving feedback. So what does that tell you? Right? If you go back to that, that he doesn't really want. So I was at the ERCL conference this weekend. Many of you know that. It was fabulous. If you can watch the replay, it was unbelievable. Especially listen to Beth Moore, Diane Langberg, Rachel Del Hollander. Unbelievable warrior women for abuse victims. Unbelievable. So if you have a chance to listen to those recordings, I'll put them on the website. I say get them ready. But so let me get the question. What was the question? I'm sorry. I forgot what the question was. Let me see if I can bring it back. Oh, so if your husband won't listen to any feedback. If your husband won't listen to any feedback, what does that tell you? It says that he wants to see you as a Stepford wife. This is what I was going to say. So while I was at the conference, there was a man that I was sitting with in the green room, and he had just written a book on artificial intelligence. This is really, really weird. I didn't know this, but he said, I said, well, like, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's about how artificial intelligence is going to change our culture. And he said it was a really hard book for me to write because I didn't realize at the time that there's, robots that are being made to be sex objects for women robots. And you can program the personality you want. And even when you get tired of their face, you can just peel off the face and put on a different face and different hair. And that's what your husband wants. He wants a robotic role. He wants someone who will just do her job, care for him, meet his needs, think he's wonderful, and not have anything to ask of him, not have any feedback to give him, and just do that. And unfortunately, oftentimes that's what's promoted in the church. Just do your role. And you can't do that because you're not a robot. You can't do that. You're a person. And so we can't just function like a robot and have a relationship with someone. All right. What that role would be is a slave, right? So slaves were called to just meet their master's needs without any expectations, but they didn't have a relationship, right? There was no relationship there. You did your work and you got a place to live, or whatever the rules were in those days, but it wasn't a relationship, right? And so this is where I think we're really missing the boat in marriage. Marriage is a relationship first and foremost. It's not a role. You're not a robot. You can't do that. So the question becomes, what do you need to do for you now? Because your husband's made it clear. I don't want your feedback. I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to care about you. Leave me alone. So now what? Where does that leave you? That's a hard question. And so in Conquer, we will help you wrestle through that. There's no, because we get to know you better, there's no quick answer to that. But understand, for you to keep begging someone to love you, begging someone to hear you, begging someone to be in a relationship with you, you can't make someone do that. Even Jesus couldn't. He cried, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I would have gathered you together, but what? You would not." Even Jesus couldn't get everyone to love him. He couldn't get everyone to value him. He couldn't get everyone to listen to his feedback. You won't either. And it's painful if it's your spouse. It is darn painful. But you have to accept reality in that if you're going to be healthy, you can't make someone be in a relationship with you. So your next step is, how do you grieve your losses? How do you accept reality? And then what do you do to stop pretending? What does that look like for you? And those are the steps of the Conquer journey. How does this apply to us with strong narcissistic traits, if not full narcissistic personality disorder? It applies fully, all right? Only that the chances of your husband waking up are very small to none, especially if he's NPD. They don't wake up because they don't want to wake up, because they firmly believe in their mind that they are entitled. They are more special. They are more wonderful than everybody else. And so, of course, everybody should revolve their life around making them happy and pleasing them and doing what they want. And if you don't, you have a price to pay. So you have to decide, what's your work to do? Do you just bow to that God? Or do you say, that's not working for me? And as you stand up and have some boundaries, sometimes a person who's narcissistic prone will make better adjustments but so often our Christian teaching is just do everything he wants and just serve him and be quiet. And you just feed the monster. You just feed the narcissism. Even if someone's not narcissistic, think of a 2-year-old. If you do everything a 2-year-old wants and you keep catering to them, what do you create? A well-adjusted child, or do you create a brat? You create a brat, right? You create a brat. So why would we do this with an adult? Why would we continue to feed the monster by doing everything for them and telling them they're wonderful and making up, we're happy when we're not, or we're pleased with them when we're not, when it's only feeding their ego. It's only feeding the unhealthy part of them. It's only feeding those 3 lies of entitlement when we do those things. It's craziness, that the counsel that women get in this situation. So trying harder on your end in the traditional way will not work with a narcissist. Will not work. He says, I'm the angry and violent one, and others believe this. How do I protect myself from this? Well, my question would be, what evidence does he have that you're violent, right? So here's what happens. Sometimes we are violent because we're getting tired of being abused or rejected or ignored or whatever. And so we start escalating, or we get tired of being controlled and we resist. Right. And so without knowing your dynamics, I can't address that. But I think there are women who are abusers too. So I want to say, if you're being violent and you're excusing that because you're upset, you have the mind of an abuser then, because that's what abusers do. They excuse their abuse because they're upset, they're angry, they're hurt, they're disappointed, they're frustrated. So they feel it's okay. It's your fault that they abused you because you disappointed them, you upset them, right? So stop upsetting me. So if you're using that same excuse because you're upset, you also have an entitlement mindset, and you need some work, and you need to work on that. And we have some women in Conquer who have recognized that. And doesn't mean that he's not abusive too, but maybe there is some truth to what he's saying. So I want you to first examine yourself and see if it's true. And if it is, you need to learn to build core strength, and Conquer would be perfect for you so you can learn to do that, so that you don't get that way. You don't think that way. You believe stewardship is important, but not retaliation. Right? You don't retaliate against someone else. You don't harm them because you're unhappy. And that's what an abuser does. And they feel entitled to do that. And then they feel entitled to have no consequences for that because you were the one who was in the wrong. You made them do that. You didn't make them do that. Nobody makes you do anything. All right. They can push your buttons, but you're the one who decides how you're going to handle that. So that's taking responsibility for yourself. However, if it's just made up story, which oftentimes people will make up stories about you, like you've had an affair, you are a violent one or whatever, and there's absolutely no evidence, here's what you're going to have to say to yourself. I can't control what he thinks. I can't control what he says. You don't have that power. So when Jesus was accused of being demon-possessed by the Pharisees, right? All he said was, it's not true. How can, if I'm casting out demons, why would I go against what I'm doing, right? He showed evidence that that's not true, but he couldn't control what they thought or what they said. All he could say was, it's not true. Here's the evidence, right? So don't get caught in anxiety because of what he's thinking. You can't control what he thinks. You can't control what anybody thinks. Do your own work. This is your part to do that. So evaluate whether there's anything there that's true. If you are reacting to his control or you're resisting his control in unhealthy ways, or you're reacting to the pain that you have from him in abusive ways too, then understand that you have to do your own work to change. It's not his fault that you act that way. If none of it's true, understand you can't control what another person thinks. That some of these truths that I help you with in Conquer are so freeing. Like, oh, like that's so true. I can't control what someone thinks. You might be the loveliest person in the world, and they think you're a pushover. Right? You can't control what someone thinks. You might be the smartest person in the world, and they think you're arrogant. You might be the shyest person in the world, and someone thinks you're stuck up. You can't control what people think about you. Right? You can just be authentic and honest and real and transparent as much as you can be and what you want to be transparent about. You can't control how people take that. That's their work to do. All right. I am a longtime fan of your ministry to the oppressed and a lay counselor. How does a helper access the Conquer material? Is there a subscription for helpers? You can join Conquer. We have a lot of helpers who join Conquer and get the material. However, Conquer material is just for Conquer people. Please don't take Conquer material and share it with your friends, have a Bible study with your neighbors. Conquer material is just for Conquer material, Conquer people. So I just really want to make that clear so you don't, share the videos with everybody else if you're a people helper. We also have a separate group called Equip, which is also for just people helpers that help. And Chris Moles and I run that group. And so if you want some more information about Equip, you can go to my website. But Conquer will give you that. You can join that and get the access to materials so that you can grow to be a better people helper by watching some of the materials. But please don't use the materials for your own personal work with people and allow them to see the material. My fiance recently was discovered to be using marijuana. He's been willing to be accountable, he's humble, etc., but I'm concerned that I should not be messing around in this situation. But I do see the things you're mentioning happening. He is doing that. I know you say wait, but how long before I know it's safe to marry him? Are there other ways I should test his resolve? So, Jennifer, I don't know if you're the Jennifer I know, but I would say wait a while because I think you've been in this bin before with other people who have shown some remorse or some humility and not really changed. So I would wait. If marijuana smoking is objectionable to you and that's a deal breaker before you're ever married to someone, just like if you found out that they were, watching porn or drinking too much alcohol or whatever, if that's a deal breaker for you before you're married to that person, then you need to really think about how do you want to argue about this and deal with this, and you have to be his policeman again and do all this stuff in a relationship that you're not married to this person yet. So I would give it at least a year. And I know you're not going to want to hear that, but I would give it a long time to see if he's really committed to change or he just is changing to get you to marry him. And then what? How do I teach my teen children to handle their emotionally destructive father? I don't leave because I feel like I need to be around to protect them when they're around him. Well, first of all, Karina, I think it's important when they're teenagers to start to have their own boundaries. So I think, unless he's hitting them, and then you shouldn't be in the house. If he's hurting them that way, then I think you can file for a protection order if you're in this country. You can call protective services and have him removed. But I think that if he is verbally abusing them, I think you can teach your kids how to have boundaries, how to say, how to not argue with dad, not to get into it with him, to say, Dad, I don't like the way you're talking to me. Dad, you're hurting my feelings when you say those things. Dad, I care about you. I want to respect you. But when you talk to me that way, it's hard for me to do that. I think those are ways that you could teach your kids to have some language. I think the second thing that you really need to do is come alongside them and say, the way that your dad talks to you, yes, you were disrespectful, or yes, you did disobey. So your dad had every right to correct you, but the way he did it was abusive. So that you want to honor their father as their father if they did something wrong that triggered some of this stuff, but that the way he did it was inappropriate and abusive. And I'm so sorry that he's that way, that he's not growing to be a better dad. All right. And then I would go to your husband and say, look, I would love for you to have a good relationship with our children. And I think they would like to have a good relationship with you. But when you talk that way, it is so demeaning and disrespectful and harmful to them that you're not going to have that. Is that what you want? Is that what you want? You don't want to have a relationship with your kids? And those are ways that maybe he will think about it. Maybe he will wake up. Maybe he won't. But I'm not, you're saying I stay so that I can run interference for my kids. So I'm not sure what you're doing right now. But I do think that at some point, especially for boy kids, you are going to have to teach them, and girl kids too, but especially for boys, because the last thing that a young man wants to feel is that I need my mother to keep me safe, right? Or I need my mother to protect me. He's not going to feel like a man. So we have to start teaching our children how to take care of themselves as they move into adulthood and not feel like we have to be the hero in their life. I have been abused emotionally, financially, and physically for 15 years, but mainly emotionally and financially. I kept praying things would change. I'm convinced that my husband doesn't believe that there is something wrong with our relationship, only that I don't listen to his instruction. We have agreed to chat this night, but not sure where to start, as each time we talk, he makes me feel guilty as if I'm the problem. So here's the belief he has. If only you wouldn't upset me, I wouldn't do this. And so there's some truth to you upsetting him. And this is where Christian women get caught in the lie. So here's what you need to say to him. So you can say, it's true. I'm sure I do upset you sometimes, or I'm sure I do upset you when I don't agree with you, or I'm sure I do upset you when I want to give my point of view and you don't want to hear it, or whatever it is that you're doing that upsets him. So that means you can hit me? And just drop it, right? I mean, just let it stay silent. So, and just give that kind of confused look. So that means it's okay to hit me when you're upset? Do you hit your boss when he upsets you? Do you hit our neighbor when he upsets you? It's okay to call me, and I would use the words, it's okay to call me a blah, 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 blah. Do you call your boss that when he upsets you? All right. So I think what you're asking him to do is reflect. Self-aware. Oh, no, I don't, because I would get fired, right? So there's this awareness that there is consequences if I acted that way with other people. I get arrested, right? But I can do it to you because there are no consequences. This is the stupidity of our Christian teaching. The Bible says, whatsoever a man sows, he reaps. If he sows violence in a home, he ought to reap jail time. If he ever does that to you again, please call the police. File a protection order. Your husband is going to get upset with you. My husband gets upset with me. 44 years. He's never hit me. All right. I've gotten upset with him. I never hit him. All right. You don't hit people. We teach that to 2-year-olds. You're upset. We teach that to 4-year-olds. Yes, your baby sister took your toy. You don't hit her. Yes, your baby sister hit you. You don't hit her back. Right? We teach this to children. Why is it as Christian women, we're willing to accept that nonsense? You upset me, so you can do this to me? No. So here's where we get caught in Christian counseling. And so the goal becomes, well, then try not to upset him. That's crazy making. How can you possibly know what he's going to get upset about today? And what he gets upset about today might not bother him tomorrow, but it's a new thing. You can't play that dance or you're going to go nuts. So have this talk tonight and say, when he starts to blame you, okay, so I did do that. You're right. So that's okay then for you to hit me. It's okay for you to call me these names. It's okay for you to grab my hair and shove my head, in the toilet because you're upset. Right? Would you do that to anybody else? Would anybody else let you do that to them besides me? Why am I letting you do that? Right? So that's your question and your work to do. So I would highly encourage you to join Conquer. What do you recommend for a woman who feels trapped in a destructive marriage? So you are believing a lie in that you have no choices. You've got a ton of choices, right? And your first choice ought to be press the button and join Conquer, because you will get more help that way than you will get in a 2-minute conversation here. All right. You have choices. It's just that you're believing a lie that I don't. And there's a real interesting experiment. I have a whole Conquer video on the learned helplessness. It's the very first Conquer video of dogs. Martin Seligman, who is a researcher, psychologist who did some research. Pavlov's dog, we've seen that research. But there was dogs who were put in a pen and they were given electric shock. The floor was shocked, and so they would give this electric shock. And if they pressed a lever, they could stop the shock, or there was no way they could stop the shock. And so, or other dogs had a little fence and they pressed the lever and they jumped over to the other side so that they didn't get the shock, right? Because of course who wants to get shocked? But the dogs that couldn't stop the shock, then when they could stop the shock or when they could jump over to the side, they didn't. They just gave up. They just stopped because they were, believing that there was nothing they could do. It wasn't true. It wasn't true. They could jump over the fence now, or they could push the lever now, but they didn't because they believed they couldn't, right? So you're in a learned helplessness mindset right now. It's not true. It's a lie that you're believing. So I would encourage you to take the first big girl brave step and join Conquer and go through the Conquer journey with us, with me. And start there, because you can do something. You have choices. You can do something different. You're not trapped. You are not trapped. You just feel trapped. And because you feel trapped, you're letting that be your reality. But that's not true. How do I love when there is a Jekyll and Hyde behavior, so it's difficult to show physical affection, and then scared and distrustful as he points out my faults? Well, God calls us to love our enemy. So I don't think that kind of love means you have to want to sleep with your enemy. In fact, you don't want to sleep with your enemy. You don't want to kiss your enemy. You don't want to be close to your enemy. You don't want to hug him. You don't want to touch him. You don't want to even see him, right? But he still calls you to love your enemy. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think it means that you don't hate, that you don't feel vengeful, that you don't retaliate. But it also means, so it's what you don't do because you love and because that's who you are. And it also means that maybe you pray for your enemy, that you do them good, not harm. So you don't harm him by, retaliating back or do that. But you may have to have some boundaries with your enemy, right? Like you would lock your door, like you would say, no, I'm not going to have a relationship with you, enemy, because you've not repaired a relationship. You hurt me because you're an enemy. If you were just a stranger, it'd be different, but you're an enemy. So you've hurt me, you've harmed me, and you haven't made any repairs. You haven't made any amends. So I can't let you in my house. I can't let you in my heart. The Bible tells you, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life, not to be hard-hearted, but have a guarded heart with some people. So speaking the truth in love for your welfare, that would be loving your enemy, doing what's good for your enemy, letting him have the consequences of his sins so he sees and hopefully wakes up. That would be loving an enemy. Justice, going to jail, all those kind of things. So I think you might even have to say to your husband, I know you desire a physical relationship with me, and I wish I could do it, but I can't because I'm so turned off by the way you treat me that I can't pretend to be interested sexually. I am completely uninterested. All right. You have to say it mean, but be truthful. Like I can't let myself be used as a body. I want to be in a relationship where someone loves me and cherishes me and I'm safe with. And if I don't feel safe with you, I feel like I'm being violated. And I don't want to do that to myself. All right. And you can say that as humbly and as soft as you can. But that might be a splash of cold water in his face. That you don't get the benefits of a great relationship when you throw weeds on the garden, right? You don't get a pretty garden then. See, and this is so contrary to the typical Christian teaching we get. Like somehow you're supposed to, what, lie and pretend in order to have sex with someone who's been harsh and abusive and mistreats you? You're just an object to use. You're not a person to love. Do you not have any value? You do. You do. And you have to value yourself. My husband has been under church discipline for abuse, and we are currently separated. He is getting counseling and says he wants to change, though he still hasn't fully owned a sin and continues to downplay, twist, blame, shift, etc. I feel pressure to reconcile our marriage, and the thought absolutely terrifies me. Don't do it. I have lost all trust and respect. Even if he does change, I still can't imagine having a healthy marriage with him. We have kids. I don't want a divorce, but I also don't want to be married to him anymore. What kind of advice do you have for me? Well, Nikki, I would two things. First, you need a legal consult to see if you can have a legal separation, which for that reason, it would protect you financially. So in most states, there isn't a legal separation anymore. It's either you're married or you're divorced. And what that does is it puts you in financial limbo land. So if you separate, but there's no legal documents in place that provide some protection from you financially, he can drain his entire retirement. He can spend all the money in the savings account. He can hide money. And then once you try to move into legal divorce or whatever, there's no assets to split because he's spent them all. Right. And that puts you in a really financially horrible place for raising children and taking care of yourself, especially if he's not going to pay child support, which he might not. So you do need a legal consult to find out what your next steps are. But I would never go back to an abuser who has not fully engaged in his own work. And since he's still twisting things and blaming, shifting, and all of that, and he can't change if he doesn't own it. Who in their right mind would take chemotherapy if they didn't really believe they had cancer, right? Nobody. And so if your husband doesn't really believe he's got some cancer that he needs treatment from, he's not engaged in the treatment. He's not engaged in the treatment. So I think when you have been physically and sexually abused in a marriage, sometimes the marriage is just dead. And you might have to come to terms with that. Right? There is no rebuilding trust, no matter how sorry someone is. And I've used this metaphor before, but if you were driving drunk and you killed somebody, no matter how sorry you are, and you might be truly sorry, and you might never drink alcohol again in your entire life, the person you killed is still dead. You're probably still going to jail. No matter how sorry you are, sometimes consequences are permanent. If you drive recklessly because you're texting, and you get in a car accident and you get paralyzed from the waist down, just because you're sorry and you never drive and use the text again, never do it again, you still have a wheelchair to live in the rest of your life. So I don't think we need to feel guilty to say to a person who has violated our trust in such a egregious way, like if someone molested your child, I hope you would never, I don't care how sorry they are, I don't care if they've gone to treatment program after treatment program after treatment program, I hope you would never let them babysit your child. Right? There's some sins that just have permanent consequences. And when a spouse is so destructive that he destroys your every shred of trust that you have, the thought of even trying to trust them again is causing you anxiety. Maybe it's time to say, this is a permanent consequence. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust you again. I hope you do change. I really hope you do. But I will never trust you. The marriage is dead. Call it for what it is. How do I deal with my husband when I confront him about his addiction? He acts like a child and then puts the blame on me, my marriage. I'm realizing it's convenient for him, of course. He wants no responsibility, but doesn't want to be alone. So he wants a mama, huh? How's that working for you? Yeah. How's it working for you? So you have an immature person who wants someone to take care of, someone to be with, and someone to have sex with, but he doesn't want to be a mature man. That's the reality. He's telling you that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to grow up. I just want to have what I want. 12-year-old boy, 14-year-old boy. What do you do with that reality? Right? And I hate to be so blunt, but I only have a few minutes to really get your attention. And that is, you got to work on you. You got to work on you. That's not okay for you. That's not what marriage is. You're not a mom. And even when you function like a mom, then you don't want to have sex with your child, right? I mean, it's just weird. So you have to think through that. What does marriage mean? What does that look like? If someone refuses to do marriage and instead wants a caregiver, do we just do it? What does that look like? I can't tell you what to do, but I'm going to give you principles and conquer. I'm going to give you wisdom and conquer. I'm going to help you think through this. I'm going to help you grow. I'm going to help you get strong and wrestle through some of these questions so that you feel really comfortable and confident in the decisions that you make, right? And nobody's going to guilt trip you and nobody's going to make you feel anything because you're going to know what you feel and you're going to deal with your feelings and your thoughts because you're going to know how to do that. So I would highly encourage you, if you're still listening, to head over and join Conquer and get started right away. I think we're about an hour and 10 minutes into so I have a haircut in about 10 minutes. So I am going to have to close for now. I'm going to do this again tonight. So be sure to tell others who may not have heard about this if you think that would be helpful for them to tune in. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for coming. Bye-bye.